Boker Tov, Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome to the Aliyah Day. Glad you're here with me this morning. Hope everybody's being blessed. We are in the third Aliyah of Parashat Vayeira. Today we'll be talking about the destruction of the fall, as it were, of Sodom and Gomorrah. What led up to the destruction? What was the big sin of Sodom and Gomorrah? What are some of the insights? What are some of the takeaways? What can we learn? How can we use this to better understand the times in which we live? As we say, studying the Aliyah Day is living with the times. And so we want to be people who live with the times and understand the importance of that. Also have an interesting insight here that harkens back to the discussion we had last week about being saved by faith. You know, Abraham believed God and he was justified and so forth. That is a common idea. Obviously, people say, see, it's just by faith. It's no longer by works or what have you, which we discovered, of course, is false, completely false. And we have another verse in this parasha. It's right before the third Aliyah, in fact, which basically tells us that same thing again. So it's just wonderful. It's wonderful when you find scriptural passages that that directly, let me put it that way, directly contradict false theology. It's always helpful. And I mean that sincerely. It's always helpful. By the way, we're back on Instagram. I had not been recording on Instagram here recently, just because, but now I'm back on Instagram, trying to make the Aliyah great again. Baruch HaShem. Good morning, Peaches Formula from Georgia. Hope you're doing great and being blessed. Glad to see you this morning. Good morning, Amita. Hope you and Pinkas are doing fantastic. Ahava, Boker Tov. Good morning, Seth and Sonia. Hope you guys are doing great. Zake and Yagal, Boker Tov, sir. Leah, hope you and Eliezer are doing fantastic. Donna Jones, good morning to you. Nellie Grace, good morning. Arnavet, good to see you this morning. Hope you're doing well there in South Africa. Emmanuel in Nigeria, good to see you this morning. Another person from the African continent. Good morning, Michael. Good to see you this morning. Russ, Boker Tov, Russ and Jen from West Virginia. Beautiful West Virginia. Good to see you this morning. Good morning, Shoshana Brenner. Good morning to Greg Kroon from beautiful Oklahoma. Denise from wonderful Great Britain. Good to see you. The wonderful United Kingdom. Good morning to Ahava. Good morning. Did I say good morning, Ahava? Good morning, Ariela Rafaela. Good morning to you. Chanel from Cincinnati, Boker Tov. Good morning, Hepzibah from wonderful Louisiana. Good morning, Sergio, watching from the left coast there with Johnny and everybody. Good to see you guys there. Who else do we have? Craig Burson. Good morning to you, Craig. Good morning, Don Bartlett. Good morning, sir. Glad to see you this morning. Kim Bement. There you are. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Chris and Crystal, Boker Tov. Glad to see you this morning. Good morning, Milka. Hope you and little baby Zara and Daniel doing great. Johan, also from South Africa. Good morning, sir. Katura, watching from the faraway city of Louisville. Good morning. Good morning to, who else do we have? Heather Miller, good morning to you. Glad you are with us this morning. And Addie, good morning. Let's see. Heather Wilson, Boker Tov to you. Hope you and your wonderful fam are doing great. Makaya, Boker Tov. Good morning to Leah. Good morning, Shmuel. Hope you and the fam are doing fantastic. And let's see. Kosher Kid, Boker Tov. There's Shmuel. Good morning to you, sir. Top of the morning to you as well. Top of the morning to you. Good morning, Thelma. Glad you're here this morning. Let's see. Levi from Oregon. Good morning to you. Hope you and your beautiful family are doing fantastic. Z-Ray. There is Z. Like the video, Zake and Rayford. And make a comment. Zake, who wants to hear from Zake and Rayford? Comment on the videos after the fact. Raise your hand out there if you'd like to have Zake and Rayford make a comment on the video after it is posted. Like and comment. Baruch HaShem. Loella, good morning. Good morning to, let's see, who else do we have? Anybody else? No, everybody's raising their hand. Baruch HaShem, see? Everybody wants to hear from Zake and Rayford. All right, so let's dive into our That's right. That's right, Keturah. Let's dive into our parasha this morning. If you look at chapter 18 and verse 19, we have here another clue that puts to rest this idea that everything's by faith, right? And it's not. It says in verse 19, for I have, talking about Abraham, of course, Hashem says, for I have loved him because he commands his children and his household after him that they keep the way of Adonai, doing charity and justice, in order that Hashem might then bring upon Abraham that which he had spoken of him. Now, the way of Adonai is also a euphemism for Torah. How do we know this to be true? Because it says in Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 3 that the nations will come to Jerusalem and learn the Torah and walk in the paths, walk in the way of Hashem. But more importantly, there is nothing here about faith in this statement. Now, does Abraham have faith in Hashem? Well, of course, because you're not going to do something if you don't believe it really, unless you're just trying to pretend or fake somebody out. But I mean, that lasts for a moment, but not typically a part of your being. But here, God is saying concerning Abraham, I have loved him. And interestingly, by the way, the word love is actually not used there. In Hebrew, the word is vedativ. Vedativ. So it's like, in Hebrew, if you want to say, I know, you would say, ani yodea. And yodea means I like know. Ani yodea, I know, right? So yadativ means I know him. But it's the word love is used here as a translation, as the commentators bring down, as Rashi even points out, that in this sense, the knowing is a term of affection. I've drawn him close to come to know him, because as we say, when you're fond of someone and like they're your friend or what have you, then you want to get to know them. You enjoy their company, you enjoy their studies or stories rather. You like them as a person. And so therefore you draw them near to you. That's really what the implication is here. I know him in the sense that I've drawn him near to me, and therefore indication of love. The important thing is to point out here, and it's just as for all of our benefit. And the question is why is this the case? Why has Hashem loved Abraham, or Yadativ, come to know him in such a way? And the answer God gives us, because he commands his children and his household after him that they keep the way of Adonai, doing charity and justice, in order that Adonai might bring upon Abraham that which he had spoken. So this is why I love him, and this is going to be the source of his reward. There's nothing there about faith. There's nothing here in this statement that God is saying, you know what, the reason I love Abraham is because he has such great faith in me. It's not there. Again, does Abraham have faith? Well, of course he does. But what is causing Abraham to be beloved by God and to receive the blessing is the fact that he, of course, follows the commandments of God and teaches others to do the same. Now, one of the things that this teaches us is, which ought to be, by the way, common sense, but unfortunately, common sense is not, as they say, common. You've heard commonly parents say something that was extraordinarily foolish when it comes to religion. They'll say, well, I'm just going to let my kid choose for themselves. I'm not going to push my religion on my kid. Of course, that's extraordinarily foolish, and it's absolutely not biblical. And interestingly, we don't do that with anything else. These parents that say that about their children, they will absolutely push upon their children other so-called non-religious values. If that parent believes in X, Y, or Z, then they will teach their child to also believe in that. Let's just say that the parent is a vegan and doesn't believe in eating meat, just as an example. Do you think that they're going to let their child eat meat? Probably not. Most likely not. Okay. Do you think they're going to let their child, have ice cream for dinner? Most likely not. And so they're pushing upon their child a menu choice. So anyway, the idea that we're not supposed to teach our children proper ways in any form or fashion is simply silly and not biblical. Here, God says, I've loved Abraham because he commands his children to follow my ways. That's religion, okay? So we see again here that this puts to rest the idea that Abraham was, that the whole blessing of Abraham came because of faith. No, it didn't. That's completely false. There's another interesting insight as this relates to the oral law that comes from Rabbeinu Bachya. And let me read this insight because this is very interesting. The oral law is absolutely valid. And this verse actually, as Rabbeinu Bachya brings down, is a way that indicates the validity of the oral law. Notice it says he commands his children. Who commands? Abraham commands. So it says here, in order that he may command his sons and household after him. Rabbeinu Shananel writes as follows concerning this verse. The mere words of the patriarchs in their lifetime were as binding as what is recorded in the written Torah at the time of the revelation. This teaches you that oral traditions handed down from the times of the patriarchs are as binding as laws written down in the text of the Torah as direct commandments from God. After all, only the 10 Commandments were heard by the people directly from the mouth of God. The remainder of the written Torah was communicated to us by a prophet, that is Moses, who wrote them down and taught them to the people. Just as there is no qualitative difference between the 10 Commandments and the other commandments of the Torah, so there is no qualitative difference between the traditions taught by Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, all who were prophets, and by Moses. Thus far, we find that it's right. It's interesting. Last comment here. I'm sorry, kind of caught me off guard. It says Rabbeinu Shananel here, according to Rabbeinu Bachya, is aiming his words specifically at the heretic group known as the Karaites. And by the way, the Karaites, some of you know about the Karaites, and if you don't know about the Karaites, and don't waste your time learning about them. But the Karaites rejected rabbinic law. They were Jews who rejected rabbinic law, and therefore became kind of a, they say they're Jewish, but it's worth noting that the Nazis did not round up Karaites and put them in the death camps. Did you know that? Isn't that interesting? Satan knows his own. But the thing is that if you look at the Karaite faith, they reject oral law, but they have their own oral law. Yeah, that's right. They have their own way of tying tzitzit, and they have their own procedures and so forth. They have their own way of doing things. And so just know that no one can live without oral law and or traditions. Traditions and oral law aren't necessarily the same, but you have traditions and you have halakha, customs, and so forth. Nobody can live without that. So in other words, if you reject thousands upon thousands years of halakha and tradition and so forth from Judaism, you'll just end up making up your own. I was to this point, before we move on to Sodom and Gomorrah, I was having a conversation one time with a gentleman who was of the Hebrew roots persuasion. And this is many years ago. And he was talking to me about how he didn't want to do things like Jews did because, it's all anti-Semitism. Let's just get down to brass tacks. But he didn't want to do the, light the candles and challah and kiddush, because that's just all Jewish. It's all tradition. And same thing about the mezuzah and all that. But this particular story had to do with Shabbat keeping, or how to honor the Shabbat, how to, and so forth. So I asked him one time, I said, okay, well, that's interesting. So when Friday night comes, what do you do to honor the Shabbat? I mean, what do you reject candle lighting, you reject kiddush, you reject challah, you reject everything like that we Jews have been doing for many, many thousands of years. So you reject all that because you know better, clearly. So what do you do? And he started to speak, and he said, well, my family and I, we have a meal. We sit around and we gather in the living room, and we read Psalms. And I said, stop. Before you go any further, I said, what page is that on in the Torah? Where does it say you have a meal and you gather around and your family in the living room and you read Psalms? And he said, well, it's not in there. It was just what we do. And I said, okay, I'm sorry, I'm confused. So you say you only want to do the word of God says, you don't want to do anything Jewish things, but where is this coming from? Of course, gentleman just sat there and with a blank stare on his face, because the reality is that it's a source of pride and arrogance. He just wanted to, in this case, he wanted to have his own law, and that really what it's amount to. It's like, you're not the boss of me. It's really sandbox, a child, sandbox recess, very petulant. You're not the child of me, and it doesn't. And of course, it's nonsensical. But we go back to this and we say, well, what's one of the many valid sources in the written law that validates the oral law? And this is actually one of them. So we get to kill two birds with one stone. Bird number one is saved by faith. False. Bird number two, there's no such thing as an oral law. That doesn't make any sense. And we read that Abraham commands his children after him. By the way, another source of oral law is where Eve is talking with the snake, and the snake says, Eve says, we're not allowed to touch the fruit lest we die. And the snake says, that's not true. You can touch it. That's the first evidence of a fence law. So now we come to Sodom and Gomorrah. The angels showed up, Memtet showed up, in my view, announced to Sarah that she was going to have a child. By the way, this all took place, incidentally, this whole event, including Sodom and Gomorrah, took place during Pesach. That's why they made unleavened bread. It's why Lot made unleavened bread for the angels, because this is occurring on the 15th of Nisan, the time of Pesach. Question becomes right off the bat, because we talked about Abraham being so hospitable, right? We talked about that yesterday. He sees the three. He wants to jump up. He wants to show them hospitality, okay? And the commentators wax eloquently about that to great extents. I mean, here's a guy he's 99 years old. He has circumcised himself. Anybody that is resisting circumcision, Abraham is your example. You say, man, I don't know. I'm 30. I'm 20. I'm 30. I'm 40. I'm 50. Maybe I'm 60, and I've never been circumcised. And I don't. Yikeser, big yikeser. I don't blame you for that. We talked about the psychology of that as a man. But your example is, you're not 99 yet. Abraham was 99, and by the way, his was in a non-clinical environment necessarily with a flint knife. Incidentally, we talked about this before, but I want to mention here again, Abraham did not circumcise himself. I just want to throw that out there. Abraham did not circumcise himself, but rather Shem, the son of Noah, who is also Melchizedek, is the one who performed the bris for Abraham on Abraham. And that's the point I wanted to make there with all of that. So in any case, we're looking at Sodom and Gomorrah, and what is the big sin of Sodom? And it's relevant because it's juxtaposed to Abraham and the story of his hospitality. We come back to Sodom and Gomorrah now. God is going to reveal to the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah. And a lot of people, when they hear Sodom and Gomorrah, they think about homosexuality. And the reason, of course, is because the men wanted to sodomize the angels. It was, of course, disgusting. But really, that is not the reason why Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed actually because of their incredible greed, their hatred for strangers, and their unwillingness, frankly, to be hospitable. Okay. Rashi brings down there was an outcry against Sodom, and this is what it says. Literally, it means the outcry of the land. Our sages, however, interpret it to refer to the cry of a certain girl whom they had killed by a horrible method, a torturous method, because she gave food to a poor man, as is described in Tractate Sanhedrin. And the Talmud brings down there was a certain girl who would bring bread out to the poor when nobody was looking, hiding it in her pitcher when she went to draw water. When the matter was discovered, they smeared her with honey and placed her on the top of a city wall, and bees came and devoured her. Sanhedrin 109. So obviously a horrific death. Okay. We turn now to Mayam Loez to read more about this story. So obviously that's horrible. And it was their homosexuality, yes, but frankly, as we're going to find out, there was all kinds of sins in the city. It was a place of debauchery, immorality, and yet, and yet the real sin, the issue that really brought it to its proverbial knees, is the fact that they were not hospitable. And that, the angels show up there. They're going to stay in the city square, and Lot implores them to come into the city. Lot had gone, remember, to Sodom and Gomorrah because ultimately that's the life he wanted to live. He didn't really want to live a Torah life. Right? We talked about that. We talked about how he utilized his dispute with his uncle as kind of a pretext to hit the exit ramp on Torah so that he could go live this life of debauchery. And evidently his wife was in on this too. One of the reasons why some of the insights bring down that the people even knew that that Lot had invited these men into his house was because, remember, hospitality was completely forbidden. It was outlawed. It was a capital crime in Sodom and Gomorrah. And so his wife, Lot's wife, went door to door when the men showed up, and she requested, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not mistaken. She requested salt, and she kind of said, can I borrow some salt? We have some guests that we're preparing for. Well, naturally, she knew that by telling people, I'm just here to borrow some salt because we got some guests we're preparing for, she was letting her neighbors know that's a capital crime. And that's how the people of the city knew that Lot was doing this. And that's why they showed up to abuse these men, because of the wife. And that's actually why when she turned to look at the city, the destruction, that's why she turned into a pillar of salt. Some say she was wanting to gaze upon the destruction. Some say that she was looking back to see if her married daughters, her betrothed daughters, were going to follow them or not. But I tend towards and prefer the third option, which was she was looking back at Sodom and Gomorrah because her heart was actually connected to Sodom and Gomorrah. And as a result of that, she turned to a pillar of salt because she had gone around asking for the salt of her neighbors. So the men go into the Lot's house, and of course the townspeople come and they're banging on the door, demanding that Lot turn over the men who have been brought in so that they can be sodomized. And of course, Lot is, if you look at the Torah story, Lot is a very complex person. First of all, he refers to them as brothers, which indicates that he saw the Sodomites as his brethren, when in fact they're not his brethren. But he connected with them. Lot was not entirely wicked. He wasn't like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Neither was he entirely righteous. And the commentators bring this down and say that really he was saved from Sodom and Gomorrah in the merit of Abraham, because he was kind of a quasi-righteous person. Lot, as you know, as some of you may know, if you read the story, he actually offered his two daughters to this crazed mob for his daughters to be abused. And listen, it's brought down in the commentaries. It's even mentioned in the Chumash that it shows the depravity of how Lot had fallen. I mean, it's not only is that brought down as completely immoral and wrong, but it's also contrary to the natural order of things. Men will typically die trying to protect their wife and children in general, but most particularly the daughters. I mean, it's just a natural thing, right? And why? I mean, men love their sons too, don't get me wrong, but and typically will die to protect their sons. But I'm just talking about as a natural human instinct, a male. There is an inherent, gentlemen, you can raise your hand, guys, if I'm speaking truth here or not. But men have just a natural, inherent drive to protect the females in their life. Obviously, their wife and their daughters being way up there. Okay. And a man will die to protect the female in his life. And this is why, incidentally, that at least in our country, that we don't allow women in combat scenarios. And one of the reasons for that is because all the men in the platoon will be distracted trying to protect the female. You say, no, we're beyond that. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't get beyond natural instincts. And having a female in the platoon puts the rest of the platoon in danger. It's because all the men will be naturally inclined to protect her. And if you don't think that's true, then I would suggest you're not living in reality. You're not living in Realville. Therefore, Lot offering his daughters to this mob is showing how he has fallen so low that he's beyond his he's lost the natural sense of the natural order, which is interesting because going back to the topic of homosexuality, that's losing the instinct of the natural order. It's not normal for a man or for a male or female to have those kinds of feelings for the same sex. That's not normal. Okay. It's just not. And so you can see that perhaps Lot was on his way to just completely falling. Heather says they let them in combat in the army now. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, that's a topic for another time. I've always thought it would be dangerous. Anyway, looking here at Me'am Loez commentary to this, to chapter 18, verses 17 through 21. Oh, before I read that, let me just read this one quick. Oh no, I did that already. Okay, never mind. I got that inside in. Praise God. Okay, good. So it says here, as mentioned earlier, Gabriel, the angel of fire, had been sent by God to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Note to self, we talked about this before, but Gabriel is often, if you look at Christian literature, particularly, obviously, Gabriel is always this cute cherub with a little trumpet. His little trumpet, he's so sweet. Kind of a baby face, kind of a cherub. Turns out that Gabriel is actually a archangel, a mighty general, a great warrior, and the angel of fire. So I don't even know where the trumpet came from, actually. I'm not aware. Maybe I've missed it. You can, if you're aware of it, you can tell me, and I'll gladly correct myself. I'm not aware of any Jewish insight that it has Gabriel blowing a little trumpet. Never. But anyway, I digress. So as above in the portion of Lech Lecha, the Torah said the men of Sodom were very wicked and sinful towards God. There, however, the Torah did not specify what sin, and now we shall discuss it. Sodom was a very wealthy city, exporting gold and precious stones. The area had so many resources that its populace had no financial worries. No other city was blessed like Sodom. The people, however, were very wicked. In general, Sodom was distinguished by 4 sins, okay? The first sin involved sexual immorality. A 6-hour journey from Sodom, there was an oasis containing pleasant springs and beautiful fruit trees. Every July, the people of the 5 cities, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboyim, and Zoar, would come together and have a carnival. For 4 days and 4 nights, there would be eating, drinking, and revelry. Men and women would go together without regard to marital status or family relationship. Sins such as adultery, incest, homosexuality were the norm at such celebrations. Kind of sounds like the ancient celebration of Christmas in Rome. I'm actually not kidding. But it says here, the second sin was that they would not allow any traveler to pass through their cities. An agreement had been made that no hospitality be given and that any traveler would have to spend the night in the street. Even the trees around the city were cut down so that birds would not receive any hospitality. Okay. A law was passed in Sodom that any person offering hospitality or food to a stranger would be burned alive. When a poor man came to Sodom, people would give him alms, but each one would have his name engraved on the coin. It was against the law for any storekeeper to sell food to a stranger, so eventually he would die of starvation. The people would then strip the corpse, and each one would retrieve his coin. A raffle would then be held for the unfortunate stranger's clothing. A boobied prize would include responsibility for disposal of the corpse. In other words, you drew the short straw, you had to dispose of the corpse. The people of Sodom hated the very idea of hospitality. Now, again, we focus in on this because one of the things that's interestingly, if you talk to non-Jews, Abraham is most known for what? What do you think? Quickly, what do you think? If you talk to a non-Jew, you said, Abraham, what's he most known for? What's the character trait that Abraham would be most known for? If you're talking to a non-Jew, what do you think they would say? Just really quickly, we're going to spend a few seconds, let you type here. 5 seconds. Okay, so Nellie Gray says hospitality. Sergio says belief. Hespasa, hospitality. Peach is kindness. Donna, covenant. Faith, kindness, hospitality, kind of going. I'm gonna give you my answer. I believe that if you talk to a non-Jew and you said, what is Abraham's quality of character? What is he most known for? They would say faith. Why? Because Abraham believed God and was credited him as righteousness. I don't know, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know that non-Jews would say hospitality, because I don't know that outside of a Jewish context that the life of Abraham's hospitality was emphasized very much in those circles. Maybe I'm wrong. However, in Judaism, what Abraham is most known for is hospitality. That's what he's most known for. That's his greatest quality. You could say on an esoteric level that he's the quality of chesed and Isaac is the quality of Gevurah. That's true too. But really what he's most known for is hospitality. And so what we're seeing here with the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah is the juxtaposition of hospitality and a hatred of hospitality, which is to teach us that we need to be people who are hospitable. And that doesn't mean hospitality is not just limited, of course, to sharing your food with people. But I would also mention that because the Torah says that he teaches his children charity, there's an insight brought down, I believe, by Rashi that talks about the fact that this is why Jews are so giving charity is such a important aspect of being a Jew. That's also a part of hospitality. Being hospitable is to give charity, as we've been reading. Another part of hospitality is just welcoming people to have questions, being hospitable in the sense that, you know, you can answer your question, you can have your give your objections and so forth, and allowing people to process their coming to truth. In other words, a lot of people out there have been taught their whole life that Abraham believed God, it was credited him as righteousness, and there you go. Salvation is really by faith. For a lot of people, finding out that that is a lie and not true at all, not even remotely true, is shocking. And we need to be hospitable in the sense that giving people the grace and the hospitality to let them process that. Because, you know, somebody said recently, it had to do with actually, it was a political comment. It had to do with wokeism and how wokeism with this last election, thank God, is dead. And for a lot of people, wokeism is a religion. And somebody said, listen, it's hard. They were having sympathy for people that have just come to realize that the United States of America, at least, has rejected wokeism. That's what happened this last election. We're sick of it. We're done with it. You know, and they were having sympathy for people that were really, really into that, realizing that it's over. Okay, we're done. And the person said, listen, it's hard for people to lose their religion. And of course, when I heard that comment, I thought, well, that's true. But then I thought about people that we reach, people that we talk to, people that we are, you know, sharing truth with. And 9 times out of 10, the truth of Torah, the truth of the Tanakh, the truth of the real gospel causes people to lose their religion. But it's a good thing because their religion is false. Okay. So losing wokeism is a good thing because wokeism is frankly, a mental illness. Okay. In my view. So in this case, losing the religion is false because we would want people who were idolaters, right? Who believe in a false religion, you know, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Shinto, whatever. We would say, hey, if you lost that religion, that's a good thing, right? Good thing, of course. Losing the Christian religion is also a good thing. But listen, we need to be hospitable to people and give them a little bit of sympathy. First of all, we've been there. We know what it feels like to sit around and go, you know, your whole life may have been a lie. And allow people, by the way, to bounce back, because there are people who kind of like, well, if they start questioning everything, right? That's okay. That's part of it. So anyhow, it says the people of Sodom hated the very idea of hospitality. We have just a couple of minutes left here. They arranged many special beds for strangers with particular people in charge of them. When a stranger would arrive and wish to rest, he was led to one of these Procrustean beds. As soon as he had made himself comfortable, his rest was rudely interrupted. If he was tall, he would be given a short bed, and his feet would be cut off to make him fit. A short person, on the other hand, was placed in a long bed. 3 people would then grab his arms and his legs, and they would stretch him to fit the bed. These friends would merely laugh at his scream. So they would basically torture people who were seeking refuge. This is how sick and demented Sodom and Gomorrah is. And the reason I wanted to mention these things is because it's so much worse than the sexual sin that so many people associate Sodom and Gomorrah with. It's so much more wicked than that. Okay. It says once Abraham's servant Eliezer had to pass through Sodom, knowing their fiendish custom, he told the people that his mother had recently died and he had vowed not to sleep in a bed for 12 months. In this manner, he escaped their beds, quote unquote. He escaped their torture, as it were. Goes on to say, they also had a custom that no stranger should be invited to any celebration or feast. If a Sodomite brought a guest to such an affair, his clothing would be taken away and he would be sent home naked. We're talking today about the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah. What led to the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah? And this stinginess, this cruelty, this selfishness, this is what led to the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah. And there's people, this type of thing, we could say is evident in so many areas. People are just inherently selfish. Well, I say that people are inherently selfish. That's really not necessarily true. People aren't necessarily inherently selfish, but I think it's better to be the warning. Let me put it another way. We can be selfish and not realize it. My wife and I, Representative and I, were driving the other day, and somebody was driving really, really slow and caused people to, including myself, to miss a turn signal because they were just driving slow and what have you. And anyway, my comment was, one of the biggest dangers of driving is that so many people think that they're the only one on the road, and they don't care that they drive slow and almost cause an accident. It's possible to drive slow enough where you almost cause an accident. And this case was the situation. So the point to that is that, drive like you're not in that instance, the road doesn't belong to you and there are other people out there. And so, in other words, being considerate of people, being kind, and it's just a small way to break down the selfish nature that can creep up on us. It's like people, you hear the stories of people during Christmas time, beloved Christmas time, and they're in the store fighting over the new doll that's everybody wants. There's fist fights break out in the aisles. Oh, Merry Christmas. Anyway, that's just an example, right? Eliezer, however, made a point of eating at such banquets without being invited. If anyone asked who invited him, he would reply in a loud voice, "But you invited me." Afraid that others had heard, the questioner would sneak out and hurry home. Eliezer did this to whoever inquired. As a result, he was able to eat heartily whenever he passed through Sodom. That's a great story. That's a great story. In fact, we'll conclude with this. We'll conclude this time. We could go on and talk about the sins of Sodom. There's a great insight from Bam Loez, and it's very long, but we're out of time. But I'll conclude based on what I just read with Eliezer with this funny story. So there was a man, and he was in a grocery store, and there was a woman there who was the town gossiper. This man had a friend, a lady friend of his, and he had allowed the lady friend to borrow his truck so that she could take care of some things she needed to do. And so he had he loaned his truck to this lady, and there you go. So another slightly older woman was a town gossiper, and she met this man in the grocery store. She says, "I know what you did. I know with whom you did it, because I saw your truck in that woman's driveway. I know that you're not married and it's not right, and you spent the night there because I saw your truck." So the man just looked at her and kind of grinned. He didn't say anything. that night, he parked his truck in her driveway. End of our Aliyah. Thank you so much for being here. We see the end of Sodom and the fall of Sodom, and what caused Sodom to fall was being cruel and inhospitable. You and I need, and being selfish. You and I need to do the opposite. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. Please be sure and like this video. Share it with all of your friends. Comment on it after the fact and share your thoughts. What's your great takeaway? We'll look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow as we continue our discussion of Parashah Vayeira. Shalom Aleichem to all of you.